Today we're going to talk about story listening. This is kind of an advanced skill. Takes some practice, takes some listening, some trial and error maybe, because it's not something that we do naturally. Maybe we could, maybe we know some about it more than we think, I don't know. But we all tell stories. And some of the stories that people tell are quite involved and can last 20, 30 minutes. And most of the stories we tell, though, are just small little vignettes, 2 or 3, 5 minutes at a time. These little vignettes are small episodes out of our life. And we may have a whole string of them, which are very important when you put them all together, listening to the themes of the stories and all of the repeated words and those kinds of things that we've been listening or learning about in paraphrase and the other skills. Most of the time, these are stories about ourselves, or maybe someone else, or maybe something that has happened in their either recent or distant past. We are really going to talk about the phenomenon of meta story. Meta means alongside of or inside of. So what we're going to be doing is trying to listen to stories and what is inside the stories that people tell. What is the person trying to say? The top of the diagram that I handed out to you, this represents the storyteller. The top is the storyteller. The bottom of the diagram, in all of the dashed lines at the bottom, I don't know if you see this down here, this is the story listener. If you're talking to someone who you don't know very well, and there is very low trust between you, the stories we hear will become more abstract. The function of abstraction in the story is to protect the storyteller from being vulnerable. It protects them from sharing something and then getting put down or hurt by it. Storytelling is the unconscious speaking. You almost never know why, at the conscious level, why you tell a story. You'll become aware of it after you learn the skill. But most of the time, you're not aware of it. It's just something that we naturally do. We just naturally tell stories. You often will hear someone say, gee, I've told that story many times. Often when talking with an elderly person, you'll hear the same story over and over again, repeatedly. The reason they keep telling the story is because you haven't heard it yet, and neither have they. Okay? Their story has not broken into their consciousness yet. This skill will help you break it into the consciousness for yourself and for the other person. Adults tell stories at 4 different levels, represented by the 4 levels of the diagram. There are characteristics of each level, and so we'll give them a number and then describe the characteristics. The first level is data or data back then. Just that little point on the pyramid is data back then. The next level down is feelings back then. The next level down would be feelings now. And then the next level is disclosure, which could either be joy or sadness. Those are the levels. All right, get my notes here. The first level, the one furthest away from the pain, is data back then. This is the story that is told in the past. It's a story that starts in a time in past history. You go way back. The language of a data back then story sounds something like this. When I was a kid, when I was in my former church,
Oh, one that you really forgot back in the day.
Yeah, back in the day. That's a good one.
I'm sorry, I had to throw that in.
That's all right, yeah. I remember years ago when we were living in such and such a town. So data back then is always put in the past. The man that came up with all of this material is named Dr. John Savage. And Dr. Savage also found 5 types of stories. So there are 4 levels, and there are 5 types. These types do not line up with any particular level. They're told in all levels. Okay, so you might, just write it out to the side, any notes you might have, or flip the page over and take notes on the 5 types of stories. You can start one type and tell it on like level 1, and by the time the story ends, you may be at the bottom level. So it varies as to what level the types are given in. So the first type is called a reinvestment story. It sounds something like this. It starts at the data back then level, okay? I remember being active in the church. It was probably 4, maybe 5 years ago, I guess. I don't know what happened, but we go up to the camp with our camper we bought a few years ago. The kids come up with the grandkids. We have a wonderful time. In fact, my family is closer together than it's ever been in our lives. We have a really good time up there. Okay, it starts with an emotional sealing off. They have reinvested their lives into something that they feel gives them more emotional support than the church or a relationship, a job. It could be a lot of different things that they reinvest their time in or away from. Remember the creative questions. We talked about noticing missing information. Okay? We should be aware that the apparent pain of what happened to them in the past and why they felt the need to leave is missing information. This is very important, and it's a very important type of story to listen for. What have they reinvested in, or what have they left to be reinvested into something else? And a lot of times there will be missing information, and you can do some creative questions and those kinds of things to see if you can find out what the missing information is. So the question in your lag time is, why do they feel the need to reinvest? All right. Another type of story you will hear a lot is a rehearsal story. Dr. Savage found this type of story when he noticed that people would go back into their history and start to tell a story. Why do we do that? I do that. You know, what's going on? What are we trying to communicate when we rehearse a story? He found that going back into our past to rehearse a story that has the same thematic material in it as your current situation. Our unconscious is bringing something up from the past, and we rehearse it because it's something that we're dealing with now. It comes, if someone is telling a data back then story, you hear them repeat common thematic words. Remember, listen to common thematic words and do a paraphrase. Now, the lag time not only picks up the paraphrase, it also picks up the theme and the key words. We need to remember the key words that keep being repeated, because it is the repetition of those key words or themes that keep coming up over and over again in the same story. Those things need to take note of. Those things are the things you need to take note of. What is being repeated. The rehearsal story is a very interesting thing. It's a very interesting phenomenon. We have lived thousands of days depending on our age. Now remember, we live 1,000 days, over 1,000 days, every 3 years. Now, we could tell a story from any number of experiences on any one of those days. We have a lot of experiences on each of those days. The question that you and I need to discern is, why are we, or why are they, telling that story at this point in their lives? They have thousands of stories from which to choose from. Why that one? Why not one of 100 others? The reason is, at the time at the time they tell it, it is triggered by the issues that are currently dealing with in your own life. So that's why we tell it. Hidden in the data back then story is a metaphor. And a metaphor is a thing, a place, an item, an object, or maybe even a person, that the metaphor represents something deeper in the life of the storyteller. The unconscious mind brings information from the unconscious to consciousness in symbolic form. You don't know why you do that. You don't intentionally create the metaphor. The unconscious mind creates the metaphor and then sends it to consciousness. Here are some illustrations of a rehearsal story. And so you need to listen to the metaphor. I'll ask you what the metaphor is when I'm done. This man has been diagnosed with cancer. And the story goes like this. I've always thought I had a lot of big, healthy trees in my backyard. The other day I was out looking and I noticed that one of the trees is rotting from the inside. I'm not sure what to do with that tree. I'd like to save it, but I may just need to cut it down. So, he's been diagnosed with cancer. What's the metaphor?
The tree.
The tree.
You thought it was healthy, but it's not.
Right. The tree that is rotting from the inside.
And that's how he sees himself.
Now, so what do you do with your lag time? This is why the lag time is so important in learning how to listen. Rotting out big tree equals life, strong body, strong life, but now with cancer. He's the one rotting out on the inside. The object is, how do you make that bridge from the metaphor to the person? You can either do it directly by doing a perception check style of feedback. However, now it's called story check. Remember, perception check has that tentative language, identify a feeling, and then ask a question. So this is tentative language, ask about the metaphor, and then a question. Where am I? So it might sound like this. I'm wondering, Bill, since you just found out you have cancer, if knowing the cancer that you have, if you don't feel like a tree that is rotting out on the inside, and you're wondering what to do with it, is that what it's like? And said when the person doing the visit said this to Bill, he immediately started to cry. That's how powerful it is. We can now bring the metaphor of the pain into consciousness. Now, please know the storyteller did not know the meaning of his own metaphor. Most of us are not aware of that in ourselves. Our unconscious mind sends those things up and over again in our story. So if you're listening to a person tell a story, even a short one like that, and that one's pretty blatant, the worst thing you can do is to take them literally and start telling them, a tree doctor, and they could come out and look at the tree if they wanted them to. He's not talking about trees. He's talking about himself. The metaphor is almost always about the person that you're listening to. Here's some other examples. This is a data back then story and a rehearsal story. I think this happened before when I was about 3 years old. I was in Oregon and I started down a very steep cliff. I wasn't even 3 yet. It was along the ocean and I got halfway down and I got stuck. I couldn't get up and I couldn't get down. The only thing I had with me was my favorite red wagon. What's the metaphoric language?
Stuck in a rut in his life.
Okay? I'm stuck halfway. That's the actual language. Stuck halfway. That's the metaphor.
I'm just wondering how he got the red wagon with him.
That's just data. Yeah. That's just data. So the question that needs to come up in your head in your lag time is what's going on here? Stuck halfway. That's the inference, and you have to check it out. You may be dead wrong. They may not be trying to make a decision about two different things at all. But you don't have to be right. If you get it wrong, they just tell you another story until you get it. Okay. So don't worry about I got to have this right every time, because you won't. You won't get it right every time. You'll make a guess that's wrong, and that's okay. What I think what might you say back to this woman? What are you going to say to her? A paraphrase might be, "It sounds like you may need to make a decision." Or a creative question might be, "Do you have a couple things you're trying to make a decision on?" Okay, here's another story. When I was a little girl, notice it starts back then, and usually it's another rehearsal story, another back then story. When I was a little girl, my father told me we were going to go over the mountain. In school, whenever I drew a mountain, she took out a piece of paper and actually drew the picture with a pointed mountain. She said, I thought when we drove over the mountain, we would get stuck and we wouldn't be able to get over the mountain. So again, what's the metaphor? What's the language of the metaphor?
Sounds like she's stuck in a rock.
Turning it over.
Stuck and can't get over.
Afraid of
Yes.
the future.
Something
Yes.
unknown.
Yes. Stuck, afraid I won't be able to get over. So it's very similar to the first one, but that's the language that you're listening for.
It may also be just feeling, the one was stuck, like couldn't go up or down, but it just made it feel like I'm constantly going, but I just can't ever reach.
Yes, right. You're stuck between two decisions, and this one is something something in the past that I really can't get over and can't get past. Yeah, which is very true. This is what Dr. Savage said in response. Is there something in your life that you are afraid of that you won't be able to get over, won't end, won't be able to get to the other side of? So very, very close. Again, tears swelled up in her eyes, and she reached out and just gave him a hug. So now, please know you don't do a meta story check with people unless you have a trust level built up with them. He tells a story. This is pretty funny. So one of his students got on a plane after having this training and was going back home, and sat down next to, or somebody else sat down next to him on the airplane. And you know how you do, you just start talking and telling stories when you're sitting on the plane. And the guy told a story, and the student did a story check, and the guy immediately reached up and hit the stewardess button. Said, can I help you, sir? He says, yes, I want a different seat. I don't want to sit next to the psychic. So you got to be careful not to overuse it, and only use it with people that you have some trust with, because it can be rather overwhelming. But as I said, I think last week, we cannot not tell our story. And the other thing is, every Sunday morning when Jerry stands up in the pulpit, he tells stories. He doesn't do a lot of personal stories. And as I was trying to put this material together, I'm thinking, I don't remember him really telling a lot of family history stories or whatever. But Dr. Savage says he could listen to 3 sermons and do a perception check on what's happening in the preacher's life. Because you cannot not tell your story. You can either make it more abstract, or if you're a preacher, make it more theological. And the more theological you try to make it, the easier it is to hear the metaphors and to really hear what's going on. He said he went to hear a sermon, and the guy knew Dr. Savage and had asked him to meet with him after the service. And the student had already gone through this training. And so before the service, the preacher told Dr. Savage, said, listen to the first story and you'll know why I want to talk to you. This is the first story he told in his sermon. Good morning, folks. I want to tell you something that happened to me this past summer. My wife and I went whitewater rafting. Before we went down the river in a 2-person rubber raft, we were told how to handle the large rocks and the little rocks. So the little rocks create violent turbulence, but small waves. The big rocks create big waves, and we were told that when you come to a big rock, you are to lean into the rock, because if you did not lean into the rock, you could get flipped out of the boat. My wife refused to lean in and got flipped out into the whitewater. That's his opening story. So let's look at the metaphors. River equals life. That's almost always. A life metaphor is a river. It's a classic metaphor. Whitewater river equals troubled life. Yes. 2-person rubber raft equals marriage. Yeah. Flipped out of the rubber raft equals
Trying to get divorced.
yeah, separation, possible divorce. See how clear it can get? Okay? And again, you got to remember, this is a guess. It's an inference. You don't know for sure until you check it out. Veterans tell a lot of stories. And they often talk about the war back then. And a lot of times, what they're really talking about is the war within them right now. So be aware of that. The metaphor and the repeated thematic material is very powerful. So the next or another you have. So these have been 3 rehearsal type stories. I'll just read what's in front of me. We all have them. We all tell them. Another type of story is called I Know Someone Who. We all have probably told those and experienced those both. This type of story in which the person tells you a story about themselves by telling you about somebody else. And it's a very profound type of story listening. Here's an example. There's a new pastor in town, and he goes to visit Mrs. Green. Mrs. Green greets him, and they have a conversation briefly. Then Mrs. Green says this. You know, when Pastor Bill was here, he came to see me almost every week. He was really great. We got along really well. We were really close. What did Mrs. Green just tell the new pastor? Yeah. I expect you to come see me.
Relationship with me.
Yeah, I expect you to come see me. What's the question in her head that's being told in her story?
How often will you come see me?
Yes. She's asking, will you value me? Will you come see me? Will you be as close to me as Pastor Bill? So you can check it out with her. It said, Mrs. Green, I'm wondering if you might be concerned if maybe I won't be as close to you as Pastor Bill. Is that important to you? Is that something you'd like to talk about? And her response would probably sound something, well, now that you mentioned it. He didn't mention it, she did. So you might hear someone say, everything at my work is just falling apart. What's the inference? His life and the things in his life are falling apart. Dr. Savage tells a story about listening to a pastor telling, I know who someone church story. He listened for about an hour and he heard the pastor say, I have these two schizophrenic churches. They are fighting all the time. After listening for a while, Dr. Savage says, I'd like to check something out with you. And that's a good way to get into a story check. Is there any possibility that you might be afraid that you are going to become schizophrenic? The man put his head down on the table, and when he lifted it, he said, my dad was just diagnosed, and yes, I'm afraid I'm going to be too. The problem we have sometimes is we don't want to check things out because we're afraid of the answer we're going to get. We don't know what the answer will be, and that makes us uncomfortable.
Like maybe going to the doctor.
Yeah. Yeah, we just put off going to the doctor because we don't want to know what the doctor's going to tell us. Let me remind you that we are listening to understand them. And in many cases, help them understand themselves. When we love someone, we will step into their lives. The next type of story is called an anniversary story. Anniversary story is a form of a rehearsal story told at a given time of the year. Our minds are an incredible time check. It remembers almost to the moment of an incident. The most blatant form of this is to talk to a widow 1 year and 1 day after the death of her mate. The story might sound something like this. I don't know what's going on with these teenagers. The teenager next door took 6 newborn kittens, put them in a burlap bag, and drowned them in the river. Isn't that just the worst thing you've ever heard? What's the theme of that story? Death. Drowning in a burlap bag. That's the metaphor. So what's the possible story check?
You might feel helpless.
Okay. What's the actual metaphoric language?
In a bag.
Yeah. Since you lost your husband, does it feel like someone put you in a burlap bag and drowned you in the river?
Lonely.
Mm-hmm. Did a piece of you die with you last year? But that's the metaphor. Okay? Another story. This situation is where a man's son died, and the conversation is between two people 11 months after his death, after the son's death. They greeted one another, and the visitor said to the dad, I've been up on Mora Rock looking at the scenery. I thought I'd come by and see you since I was in the area. To which the dad responded, have you ever been on Mora Rock and watched the sun go down? They talked a little bit more, and the listener goes on to say, I know your son died almost a year ago. How's it been for you? How are you doing? The dad said, it's been a hard year. I've never cried so much in my entire life. I have some unfinished business. Oh, what's that? Asked the listener. The dad said, my son's ashes are in an urn in the closet. He requested that we throw them off Mora Rock, and I haven't been able to get that done. The listener replied, have you ever been up on Mora Rock and watched the sun go down? You hear it? The dad started weeping. S-U-N equals S-O-N. That's the metaphor. And you cannot not tell your story. The next type of story is called transition story. Transition story is one or all three components. It has an ending, a confusion, and a beginning. Sounds like this. I'm in the process of, I don't know what I should do. I don't know. I think I might be changing jobs and doing something different. I don't know, though. I'm not sure what I should do. The more you try to abort an ending and not finish it, the longer you stay in a state of confusion. The cleaner you can make your endings, the shorter the period of confusion and the faster you can start a new beginning. These stories can start on any of the levels, including the next one down, which is the feelings back then. Just yesterday, I heard a transition story. Yeah, a real story. I was considering changing jobs. He left a job, got into a new job. There's some things that are happening, and he was saying, I don't know, what do you think? And there's a lot of transitional kinds of questions, just in him trying to make the decision of whether to change jobs again or not. Thought it was very interesting. We're going to be doing this today. All right, the next level on the chart, the next level down, is feelings back then. The difference is the data back then story is filled with facts and information, has almost no feelings, no emotion. Feelings back then can be any one of these, but it has feeling tones. We could almost go back to Mrs. Green saying, I really miss Pastor Bill. We were really close. There's feelings, there are feeling tones in that. She's not naming the feelings, but there are feeling tones in her voice. The third level is a very significant one. It's feelings now. What happens is the feelings begin to move toward consciousness. This stage or this level is very significant, and you will actually see it in front of you. You almost never miss this stage as a listener. It's very blatant because it's sitting right in front of you. The person begins to tear up. Their face flushes. They become agitated. It can be as like the very tips of her fingers start to quiver. All of those are behavior descriptions we talked about. But those are the things your lag time begins to pick up. I've done counseling, and the wife, involved in like marital counseling, and the wife said, "Oh, everything's fine. We're good." But there's this little red splotch forming on the side of her neck. And I said, I noticed this little red splotch. What's all that about? Are things really going okay? Well, and you got to bring those feelings to consciousness. But it's right in front of you. Then we move into the final level, and either the level of pain or the polarity is joy that comes to consciousness, and it's called self-disclosure. We call it the moment of aha. I get it. I now understand what's going on. You understand it, and more importantly, they understand it. This is the moment when the story breaks into new meaning. The story in the storyteller breaks into meaning for you and for them. It's quite possible for us to do self-story listening, by the way. Just listen to yourself and the stories you tell. And the question that comes up in your head is, why do I keep telling these stories? What's happening in me? What's going on? You can begin to work on your own stuff, and you can do it by way of journaling. Journaling really helps as you think about what stories you're telling, and taking note of the theme or the repeated words that are in your stories, and you begin to look at those themes and those words, and can kind of do some working on your own stuff and beginning to bring your metaphors into your own consciousness. Did you need to say something? I thought you started. Okay. I thought you. Yeah. 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 There it is. The problem is not the storyteller. All right? We use stories all the time. The problem is in, can we, as story listeners, hear the story that the storyteller is telling? All right? Now, the bottom part of this chart with all the dots, dashes, that's you as the listener. It's called counter story. Excuse me. Counter story goes off in me as you tell your story. Counter story goes off in you as I tell my story. Okay?
In other words, we can relate with what
Absolutely. We can relate. And as I have told the stories and given the illustrations, it seemed to me by your physical responses that you're going, yeah, I can relate to that. There was a counter story going off in either the transition story or the data back then story or the loss of a spouse story. There's a lot of counter story that goes on inside us. And you can listen to yourself, listen to the stuff that's going on inside you as someone's telling a data back then story. Oh yeah, that reminds me of my past. That there's I have a very similar story. So the thing with storytelling or counter story is I don't want you to suppress that, but I also don't want you to jump in and start telling your story. If we're just chit-chatting, it's not a big deal. I mean, we do that all the time. But if you're meeting with somebody that you're really trying to do some in-depth listening, then you don't tell your story, but you allow your counter story to inform you so that you can use your lag time to say, okay, I remember when I was in that situation, this is what I was feeling, and you can do a perception check or a story check or a paraphrase and say, I'm wondering if, you might be feeling very frustrated in that situation. And you can say I was in a very similar situation in my past. Is that true for you as it was for me? And let them tell you if you're right or not.
I've been in situations where someone's jumped in too soon.
Yes.
For their story, and it comes across as if they don't really care about
Right.
it. And I don't think that was necessarily true, but they didn't know what to say. So to fill time or whatever, they told their own story. But
Right.
it comes across so, don't you care about what they do?
Yeah, yeah.
I wanted to say that, but of course.
Yeah, and it changes the focus
Yeah.
off of the person that was originally speaking.
Across, so.
Yes, yeah. You can jump in and start telling your own counter story way too quickly. And it can feel very uncaring. You're absolutely right.
And that's extremely common anymore.
I'm sorry?
That's extremely common anymore.
Yes,
Because we're not listening, we're thinking of our reply back.
exactly. And so when we're trying to do in-depth listening, let's stay focused on them rather than trying to tell our own story and changing the focus. So you can use what's inside you to inform you, but check it out with them to make sure that's how they feel as well. You produce what's called a mirror story. That's why the dashed lines. It's like looking into the mirror. It's like the reflection pool, like in the Washington Monument. You can reflect back the story that they're telling you. So what happens is I tell my story, and your counter story back then gets triggered. And you can say, if you think you had it bad back then, you should hear what happened to me. Again, changing the focus to yourself. Stay focused on them. What happens is I can only go deeper and deeper, vacillating from story to story in my life, and I end up in a pain story. And that same thing is going to happen to you. Because as they tell their story, it's going to pull you back into your painful story. And as I said, I think last week, we can only go as deeply into somebody else's pain as we're willing to go into our own. And so
That's why sometimes people stop someone.
yeah, that's right. That's exactly why somebody will change the story and get it back on. I had it worse than you did, and they want to tell their own painful story, or sometimes they just change the subject entirely. Hey, how about them Colts? What kind of a season are they going to have this year? And it's because they're unwilling to go into their own pain as a listener. So, when we do this kind of listening, as we use all of these skills together, and you start weaving all of these skills, and doing the paraphrasing and the perception checks and the story checks and all of the stuff that you're learning in this class, these skills bring out those feelings, all the data from back then, and all of the stuff that the people are wanting to share with you. But you have to be willing to enter into your own pain and join them in their pain. If you cannot deal with your own pain, it's going to be difficult to do this kind of listening. All right? So just be aware of that, and just make sure that you're willing to go that deep. And there are times when you'll be able to go so far and then not be able to go any deeper. And that's the point where you can say, I'm not sure I know what to do, or I don't know what to say. Let's see if we can find somebody else that can talk with you more about this situation, and maybe can help you more than I can. And that's where you'd look for a referral. You cannot be everybody's savior, and neither can I. So we just be aware of the fact that there are other people that can, and that's okay. You're not expected to go that deeply into somebody else's pain when you've not had that kind of training or whatever. So Jesus took the disciples into the Garden of Gethsemane. And what did the disciples do? They fell asleep. The disciples modeled human behavior when it comes to sticking with somebody else's pain. They avoided the pain Jesus was in. That's the human model. Jesus said, I give you another alternative. In the Gospel of Matthew, it tells us that he fell prone on his face. Do you know how much pain you have to be in to fall on your face? Is it Matthew that says he sweat blood, like drops of blood? I meant to go back and check which gospel that was in, and I forgot. It might be Matthew. But, that's a lot of pain to fall on your face and to have that physical reaction that there's a physical term for that. I don't remember what it is, where you can actually sweat drops of blood in that much agony. Jesus comes back 3 times asking, could you not watch with me 1 hour? Here's a paraphrase. Could you not stick with me in my pain for 1 hour? The disciples represents us. They are our metaphors. What we need to remember is on the other side of your pain and on the other side of their pain is new life and resurrection. There's new creativity, new hope. On this side is despair and lostness, hopelessness, feeling stuck and feeling inadequate, and all of that on this side. The issue is, can you go through it and get to the other side? And that's a scary place. To be able to walk into your pain is one of the issues. To be able to wrestle with it like Jacob wrestled with the angel. When Jacob comes out of that time of wrestling, he has 2 things. He has a new name and a limp. A wounded hip. You can come away with 2 things as you enter your pain. A new life and a wound. When Jesus came out of the tomb, he had new life and some wounds. The question is, what happens in you when you hear that? When you hear on the other side of pain is new life and resurrection and new life and a wound, what goes on inside you?
There's hope.
Hope? So that is,
the pain might, I don't wanna say scars, because that's what I heard you say with Jesus,
Yeah.
but beauty marks.
Yes, beauty marks. New life and a wound, beauty marks, scars, a new lease on life, a new perspective, all of that. When we do in-depth listening, one of the things that I try to do, if I can't do anything else, if I've not been able to hear what's going on, or bring all of that into their consciousness, if I failed with all of the listening skills, what I want them to leave with is hope, and say, let's keep coming back and continuing to listen, continuing to talk. Maybe I'll get it one day, and maybe I can help you understand it one day. But there is hope in the future, and hope for the future, because of the new life and the resurrection that we have in Christ, and the hope that we have in Him. And so that's the story, and that's what we want to help people leave with. But I cannot know your pain. I can only know my pain and what's triggered in me. I live 100% in my own body. You live 100% in your body. So my pain is not your pain. Your pain is not my pain, but I can allow my pain to help me understand your pain, and we can see if it's the pain matches at some point and comes to a point of understanding. But I always tell people when I'm working with people at the funeral home, I said, you'll hear some things from people that will be hurtful, quite frankly. They'll say something in trying to bring comfort. It will not bring comfort at all. It'll be a slap in the face. One of the most obvious is when a person loses a baby, and somebody walks up and says, "Oh, it'll be okay. You can have another kid." That stings. And I'll say, what I recommend is try your best to receive those comments with them having good intentions. They just don't know what to say. They don't know what to do, and they want to be helpful and just don't know how. So do your best to receive those comments with a good intent. And I've had people after the visitation or as they were leaving say, I appreciate you warning me of that, because it did help. There were some things that were said that I had to kind of take a deep breath and say, their intent was good.
They showed up.
Yeah, they showed up, and that was the main thing. So anyway, we need to make sure that what we are trying to do is listening, staying focused on them, trying to help them through their pain. And any comments or questions? Like I said, this is a skill that takes a lot of practice. It's not something that you walk out of here and just start using, but I ran into Faye Davis at Rural King, and we were talking about Glenn and how long it's been since his death, and she was talking about how God has been with her, and a lot of different things. But she was talking about a friend of her giving her an item, and in the item was the touch of the master's hand. And I just made a comment, so you've been touched by the master's hand, haven't you? And her face just lit up. Yes, I have. And it was so much fun to repeat those words to her, using the metaphor and the item that she was telling me about.
Perfect. Yeah.
And it was perfect. Yes, you have been touched by the master's hand, but it just brought it to her consciousness, and it was like a light bulb coming on. Her face just absolutely lit up. And so it can be a powerful thing when used. And anyway, it's one of the things that I just think is fascinating, and it's very helpful. I'll stop rambling now.